Welcome to the Bible Conversations podcast. Our focus for conversation starters this year is going to be practical tips on how to begin a conversation with someone about the Bible and about Jesus. We hope that you will find some helpful information in these short segments that will enable you to share your faith with others.
For today's conversation starter, I want to discuss our approach when it comes to sharing the gospel, to sharing our faith. 2 weeks ago, we talked about our attitude, how we need to be excited, how we need to look forward to opportunities to share our faith. Last week, Chris shared with us how we should not fear. We should not be afraid of what will come when we share our faith. It's a good thing. Today, I want to share with y'all the approach, the mindset that we have going into it, and how we should be approaching a discussion with someone about our faith, regardless of who that person is. And I want y'all to follow along with me as we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, starting in verse 19, what I mean by our approach to sharing our faith. Starting in verse 19 of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul writes to the church in Corinth, "For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings." That's what we have to do as well. We have to focus on who we are addressing, not only on our internal attitude, not only on our internal feelings, but we have to recognize who we are speaking to and be able to relate to that individual. When we step up to share the gospel, it's not just a cookie-cutter approach. It's not just a simple phrase that we can repeat over and over in order to share our faith with any individual that we meet in our lives. We have to be aware of who we are talking to, who we are addressing, so that we can relate to them and help them relate to the gospel. I want to show you one example of how Paul did this before we close this conversation starter. In Acts chapter 17, we read of the account of Paul in Athens. He's walking through the city in verses 16 through 21, and he's observing what's around him. It's a city full of idols. It's a city that of people that worship all kinds of different idols to every single thing. They have gods for every single thing in their life. But in verse 22, Paul is invited to the Areopagus, a place that philosophers discuss and have all of their ideas laid out in public. And Paul, in verse 22, it says he's standing in the midst of the Areopagus, and he says, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For I passed along and observed the objects of your worship. I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you." Paul met people where they were at. Paul was able to relate with people where they were at. To the weak, he became weak. He became all things to all people, so that he might win some over for Christ. We have to do the same thing in our approach today.
Thank you for listening to this conversation starter. We appreciate your desire to share your faith with others, and we hope that this episode has been of benefit to you. If you would like to reach us, please email us at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram by simply searching Bible Conversations. Please check back in on Fridays for our full episode.